Welcome to Her True Stories, where we share the most compelling tales of triumph, betrayal, and revenge. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss a single story. Today's tale will leave you speechless. It's about a 77-year-old woman who turned her greatest pain into her most powerful weapon. This is Katrina's story, and trust me, you've never heard anything like it. My name is Katrina Walsh, and at 77 years old, I've lived through more heartbreak than most people experience in 3 lifetimes. But I've also experienced a victory so sweet, so perfectly orchestrated, that it makes every tear I've shed worth it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, honey, mine was frozen solid for 20 years before I finally served it up. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the day my world first shattered into a million pieces. I was 35 when I first laid eyes on little Emma. She was barely 3 years old, with tangled blonde hair that hadn't seen a proper brush in weeks, and eyes that held too much sadness for such a tiny soul. The social worker, Mrs. Henderson, had called me that morning with urgency in her voice. "Katrina, we have a situation. There's a little girl who needs immediate placement. Her mother." Mrs. Henderson paused, choosing her words carefully. "Her mother is currently incarcerated for drug-related charges, and there's no other family willing to take her." I had been foster parenting for 3 years by then, having never been able to have children of my own. My late husband Robert and I had tried everything: doctors, specialists, treatments that cost us our savings. Nothing worked. When Robert died in that car accident when I was 32, I thought my dreams of motherhood died with him. But foster care gave me purpose, gave me the chance to be the mother I'd always dreamed of being. Emma was different from the other children who had come through my doors. She was quiet, almost eerily so, and she flinched whenever I moved too quickly. The first night, I found her sleeping on the floor beside her bed, curled up like a wounded animal. It broke my heart into pieces. "Sweetheart," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "You can sleep in the bed. It's safe here." She looked up at me with those haunting blue eyes and whispered, "Mama said beds are for good girls. I'm not good." That was the moment I knew Emma wasn't just going to be another foster child passing through my home. She was going to be my daughter, in every way that mattered. The next 18 months were a beautiful, challenging journey. Emma slowly began to trust me, to laugh, to play like the child she deserved to be. We had tea parties with her stuffed animals, painted pictures that I hung on the refrigerator with pride, and read bedtime stories until she fell asleep in my arms. She started calling me Mama Katrina, and every time she said it, my heart grew a little bigger. I officially adopted Emma on her 5th birthday. The paperwork was finalized, and she became Emma Walsh, my daughter, legally and in every way that mattered. Her birth mother, Lisa, had signed away her parental rights without hesitation. She was serving a 10-year sentence and, according to the social worker, had shown no interest in maintaining contact with Emma. She said it was better this way, Mrs. Henderson had told me. She wants Emma to have a fresh start. I threw Emma the most beautiful birthday party a 5-year-old could imagine. Pink balloons, a princess cake, and a backyard full of laughter. When she blew out her candles, she looked up at me with those bright eyes and said, "I wished for us to be together forever, Mama." If only I had known then that forever had an expiration date. Emma thrived in school, made friends easily, and brought home report cards that made me burst with pride. She was artistic, just like her adoptive father Robert had been, and she would spend hours drawing pictures of our little family, always the 2 of us, holding hands, with hearts floating above our heads. "This is us, Mama," she'd say, presenting me with another masterpiece. "We're happy." And we were. God, we were so happy. By the time Emma was 12, she had grown into a confident, beautiful young girl. She played violin in the school orchestra, was captain of her soccer team, and had a tight-knit group of friends who practically lived at our house. I was the mom who always had homemade cookies ready, who chaperoned field trips, who never missed a single game or recital. "You're the best mom in the world," Emma would tell me, usually when she wanted to stay up past her bedtime or have ice cream for breakfast. "And you're the best daughter," I'd reply, meaning every word. The teenage years brought their challenges, of course. Emma went through a phase where she dyed her hair black and wore too much eyeliner. She rolled her eyes at my rules and tested boundaries like any normal teenager. But underneath it all, we had a bond that I thought nothing could break. "Mom, you're so embarrassing," she'd groan when I'd wave at her friends from the car. "That's my job, sweetheart," I'd laugh back. "I'm your mom. I'm supposed to embarrass you." She'd try to look annoyed, but I could see the smile she was fighting. When Emma turned 16, I gave her the locket that had belonged to my own mother. It was a simple gold heart with a tiny diamond, but it meant everything to me. "This is for you to pass down to your daughter someday," I told her as I fastened it around her neck. "It's a symbol of the love that connects mothers and daughters across generations." She hugged me so tight that day, tears in her eyes. "I love you, Mom. I'm so grateful you chose me." "I didn't choose you, sweetheart," I replied, stroking her hair. "You chose me. You made me a mother." Emma graduated high school with honors and got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. At her graduation party, surrounded by friends and family, she stood up to make a speech. "I want to thank the most important person in my life," she said, looking directly at me. "My mom, Katrina Walsh, who saved me and loved me and made me who I am today. Mom, you gave me everything: a home, a family, a future. I promise I'll make you proud." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. College went by in a blur of care packages, late-night phone calls, and visits home that were never long enough. Emma was studying art therapy, inspired by her own journey of healing. She had a serious boyfriend named David, who treated her like a queen and made her laugh until her sides hurt. "I think he's the one, Mom," she confided during one of our weekly phone calls. "He reminds me of how you always described Dad: kind, funny, and completely devoted." "Then he must be pretty special," I replied, my heart swelling with happiness for her. Everything was perfect. Emma graduated magna cum laude, got engaged to David, and landed a job at a prestigious children's hospital. At 22, she was everything I had dreamed she would become: successful, happy, and surrounded by love. The wedding was magical. Emma looked like a princess in her white dress, and when she walked down the aisle, she winked at me from behind her veil. During the mother-daughter dance, she whispered in my ear, "Thank you for giving me a life worth celebrating." "Thank you for giving me a purpose," I whispered back. Emma and David settled into married life beautifully. They bought a charming little house just 20 minutes from mine, and I helped them paint the nursery when Emma announced she was pregnant with their first child. "I want to be the kind of mother you were to me," she said, her hand on her growing belly. "Patient, loving, always there." "You will be," I assured her. "You have so much love to give." When little Jackson was born, I thought my heart might explode with joy. Emma was a natural mother, just as I had predicted. She was patient and gentle, singing the same lullabies I had sung to her. When Jackson was fussy, she'd call me for advice, and I'd rush over with homemade soup and helping hands. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom," she'd say, exhausted but glowing with new motherhood. "You'll never have to find out," I promised. 2 years later, Emma gave birth to little Michael, and our family felt complete. I was Grammy Katrina to 2 beautiful boys who filled my days with laughter and my heart with purpose. Emma and I had lunch dates every week, and she still called me for advice on everything from recipes to parenting struggles. "You're my anchor, Mom," She told me one afternoon as we watched the boys play in the backyard. I don't know who I'd be without you. Life was beautiful. We had our routines, our traditions, our unbreakable bond. Emma's past seemed like a distant memory, something that had happened to someone else. She was Emma Walsh, my daughter, and that was all that mattered.
I should have known it was too good to last.
The first crack in our perfect world came on a Tuesday in March. Emma had seemed distracted during our weekly lunch, picking at her salad and checking her phone repeatedly. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked. "Yeah, just work stuff," she replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, she called me crying. "Mom, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to be hurt." My stomach dropped. "What is it, honey?" I've been thinking about my birth mother lately. I don't know why, but I can't stop wondering about her. What she looks like now, if she's okay, if she ever thinks about me. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet, but I forced my voice to remain calm. "That's natural, sweetheart. You're allowed to be curious. I love you, Mom. You're my real mother. But I need to know." I understand. I lied, my heart breaking with each word. "Whatever you need to do, I'll support you." But I didn't understand. After everything we'd been through, after all the love and sacrifice and devotion, why wasn't it enough? Why did she need to go looking for someone who had abandoned her? Emma hired a private investigator, and within 2 weeks, she had found her. Lisa Martinez, now Lisa Rodriguez, had been released from prison 8 years ago. She was remarried, living in California, and working as a hairstylist. She had cleaned up her life, gotten her GED, and was apparently thriving. "She wants to meet me," Emma told me, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "She says she's thought about me every day for the past 20 years. Have you thought about what this means?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "She gave you up, Emma. She signed away her rights." "I know, Mom. But she was young and struggling. Maybe she's different now." Different now. As if 20 years of my love and devotion could be erased by a woman who had suddenly decided she was ready to be a mother. The meeting was arranged for the following weekend. Emma drove to California, leaving the boys with David and me. Those 2 days were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the fear that I was about to lose my daughter. When Emma came home, she was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since her wedding day. "Mom, she's amazing," Emma gushed, showing me photos on her phone. "She looks just like me, or I look just like her. And she's so sorry about everything. She cried when she saw me, said giving me up was the biggest mistake of her life." I stared at the photos, my heart turning to stone. Lisa was beautiful, with Emma's blonde hair and blue eyes. She looked young, vibrant, nothing like the broken drug addict who had given birth to my daughter. "She wants to be part of my life," Emma continued. "She wants to meet the boys, to get to know David. She says she understands that you're my real mother, but she hopes we can all be a family." All be a family. The words hit me like a physical blow. "How do you feel about that?" I managed to ask. I think I'd like that," Emma said, her eyes bright with possibility. "I mean, I have room in my heart for both of you, right?"
Wrong.
So completely, utterly wrong. The next few months were a nightmare disguised as a dream come true. Lisa visited every few weeks, each time staying longer and becoming more embedded in Emma's life. She was charming, I'll give her that, funny, energetic, and completely devoted to making up for lost time. "Look what Lisa brought the boys," Emma would say, showing me expensive toys and designer clothes. "She says she wants to spoil them since she missed out on spoiling me." Lisa had money, apparently. Her new husband owned a chain of successful restaurants, and she lived in a beautiful house in Malibu. She could offer Emma things I never could, luxury vacations, designer handbags, connections to influential people. She's taking me to Paris for my birthday, Emma announced one day, practically bouncing with excitement. Just the two of us. She says it's something she's always dreamed of doing with her daughter. Her daughter. The words cut through me like a knife. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile. You deserve to be spoiled. But inside, I was screaming. I was the one who had been there for every birthday, every scraped knee, every broken heart. I was the one who had sacrificed everything to give Emma the life she deserved. And now this woman, this stranger, was swooping in to claim credit for all of it. The worst part was how easily Emma seemed to forget our history together. She started calling Lisa Mom and referring to me as Katrina when talking to other people. She'd say things like, "My mom Lisa thinks I should cut my hair shorter," or "Mom Lisa says I'm too generous with money." "What should I call you then?" I asked one day, trying to keep my voice light. "You're still my mom," Emma said, but there was something different in her voice. "You're just your Katrina now." It's less confusing. Less confusing. 23 years of motherhood reduced to a name change for convenience.
Lisa was smart, I'll give her that.
She never directly criticized me, but she had a way of making subtle comments that planted seeds of doubt in Emma's mind. "It's so interesting how different your childhood was from what I imagined," she'd say during family dinners. "I always pictured you in dance classes and piano lessons, traveling the world." "Katrina did her best," Emma would reply, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. "Oh, of course.
I'm not criticizing.
I just wonder what kind of opportunities you might have had if things had been different. If things had been different. If I had been different. If I had been enough." Lisa started creating new traditions with Emma and the boys. They had monthly spa days, weekly shopping trips, and elaborate birthday parties that put my simple celebrations to shame. She documented everything on social media, posting photos with captions like, "Making up for lost time with my beautiful daughter," and "Grateful for second chances." The boys, bless their hearts, were confused by the whole situation. Jackson, now 5, asked me one day, "Grammy, why does Mommy have two mommies?" "Sometimes families are complicated, sweetheart," I explained, my heart breaking. "But what matters is that you're loved." "I love you the most, Grammy," he said, hugging my legs. "I love you the most too, baby." Emma started canceling our weekly lunch dates, claiming she was too busy with work and Lisa's visits. When I called to check in, she seemed distracted, hurried. "Can I call you back, Katrina? Lisa and I are planning a trip to Napa Valley." "Of course," I'd say, but she rarely called back. The final straw came at Jackson's 6th birthday party. I had been planning it for weeks, a superhero theme with decorations I'd spent hours making by hand. But when I arrived at Emma's house, I found that Lisa had already transformed the backyard into an elaborate superhero headquarters, complete with a bouncy castle and professional entertainment.
Surprise!
Lisa called out, beaming with pride. I wanted to do something special for my grandson. Emma looked embarrassed.
I'm sorry, Katrina.
Lisa surprised us this morning. She insisted on handling everything. "It's fine," I lied, watching the children play with decorations that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine anymore. During the party, I overheard Lisa talking to one of Emma's friends. "I feel so guilty about missing Emma's childhood," she was saying. "But I was young and struggling, and I thought I was doing the right thing. Now I'm trying to make up for all those lost years." "Emma's so lucky to have you back in her life," the friend replied. "It's like a fairy tale."
A fairy tale.
That's what my nightmare had become to everyone else. A beautiful story of redemption and second chances. After the party, as I was leaving, Emma walked me to my car. "Thank you for being so understanding," she said. "I know this is an adjustment for everyone." I love you, sweetheart, I replied. I just want you to be happy. I am happy, she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm finally complete, you know? I have my whole family now. Complete. As if 23 years with me had left her lacking something essential. I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face, knowing that I was losing my daughter and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The distance between us grew wider with each passing week. Emma's calls became less frequent, her visits shorter. She started making excuses about why the boys couldn't spend the night at my house. They're just so busy with school and activities, she'd say. And Lisa likes to take them on weekend adventures. Weekend adventures that didn't include me. I tried to be supportive, to hide my hurt, but it was becoming impossible. During what would be our last weekly lunch date, I finally broke down. Emma, I feel like I'm losing you, I said, tears in my eyes. I know you're excited about having Lisa in your life, but I'm still here. I'm still your mother, too. Emma looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her napkin. You're being dramatic, Katrina. Nothing's changed between us. Everything's changed, I replied. You barely call, you cancel our plans, you stopped asking for my advice. I raised you, Emma. I was there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every milestone. Doesn't that count for something? Of course it counts, she said, but her voice was cold. But Lisa is my biological mother. That's a connection you can't understand. A connection I can't understand. The woman who had given birth to her but abandoned her had a connection that somehow trumped 23 years of unconditional love. I understand more than you think, I said quietly. I understand that biology doesn't make you a mother. Love does. Sacrifice does. Being there every single day does. Emma's face hardened. Are you trying to make me choose between you? No, I said, though part of me wanted to scream yes. I'm trying to remind you that I exist. You're being selfish, she said, standing up from the table. I'm finally getting to know my real mother, and you're making it about you. Real mother. The words hit me like a physical blow. I am your real mother, I said, my voice shaking. I'm the one who held you when you had nightmares, who taught you to ride a bike, who cheered at every soccer game. I'm the one who loves you unconditionally, not the one who abandoned you. She didn't abandon me, Emma snapped. She was young and scared, and she made the best choice she could. At least she's not trying to guilt me into choosing sides. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm asking you to remember who raised you. I remember, Emma said coldly. But I also remember that you're not my real mother, no matter how much you want to be. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Not her real mother. After everything we'd been through, after every sacrifice I'd made, after every moment of love and devotion, I was not her real mother. I see, I said quietly, standing up from the table. I think I understand now. Katrina, wait. No, it's okay, I interrupted. You've made your feelings clear. I'm not your real mother. I'm just the woman who raised you. I walked out of the restaurant that day knowing that my relationship with Emma was over. Not because she had said the words, but because she had meant them. The months following that devastating lunch were a blur of pain and isolation. Emma made a few half-hearted attempts to reach out, but the damage was done. She had drawn a line in the sand, and I was on the wrong side of it. I think we both need some space, she said during one awkward phone call. Maybe we can figure out how to move forward once things settle down. Space. That's what she called erasing me from her life. I stopped receiving invitations to family gatherings. My weekly visits with the boys came to an abrupt end. Emma's explanations were always reasonable, always logical. The boys were busy with school. She was dealing with work stress. They were traveling with Lisa. It's just temporary, she'd say when I asked about seeing Jackson and Michael. Once we get into a routine with Lisa, we'll figure out a schedule. But the routine she was referring to was one that didn't include me. The worst part was watching from the sidelines as Lisa seamlessly inserted herself into the role I had spent 23 years building. Through social media and mutual friends, I learned about birthday parties I wasn't invited to, family vacations I wasn't included in, and milestones I wasn't there to witness. Lisa posted photos of herself teaching Jackson to ride a bike, the same bike I had bought him for his birthday. She shared videos of Michael's first piano recital, where she sat in the front row beaming with pride. She even posted a photo of herself and Emma baking cookies with the caption, "Teaching my daughter my grandmother's secret recipe." Her grandmother's secret recipe. I had been the one to teach Emma to bake, spending countless afternoons in the kitchen showing her how to measure flour and crack eggs. Now that tradition, like everything else, belonged to Lisa. 6 months after our last lunch, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Emma and David were having a housewarming party for their new home, a beautiful house in an expensive neighborhood that I later learned Lisa had helped them buy. I stared at the invitation for hours, noting that it was addressed to Katrina Walsh rather than Mom, or even Katrina Walsh and guest. I was being invited as an acquaintance, not as family. I almost didn't go. The thought of watching Lisa play grandmother to my grandchildren, of seeing Emma treat her like the mother I had always been, was almost too much to bear. But I needed to see for myself how complete my replacement had become. The party was everything I expected and worse. Lisa was the perfect hostess, charming guests with stories about her successful business and her joy at being reunited with her daughter. She wore a beautiful dress that probably cost more than I made in a month, and she had the boys clinging to her like she'd been in their lives forever. "Grammy Lisa, watch this," Jackson called out, doing a cartwheel in the backyard. Grammy Lisa. The title that had been mine for 6 years now belonged to someone else. Emma barely acknowledged me beyond a polite hello. She was too busy introducing Lisa to friends and neighbors, telling the story of their reunion like it was a movie script. "It's been the most amazing year," I heard her tell one of her colleagues. "Finding my birth mother has been like finding a missing piece of myself. The boys absolutely adore her, and she's been such a blessing to our family." A blessing. While I had become a burden, to be managed. I lasted an hour at the party before I couldn't take any more. As I was leaving, Emma caught me at the door. "I'm glad you came," she said, though her tone was distant. "Are you?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. "Of course. You're important to me, Katrina. This doesn't change that. Doesn't it?" I replied. "When's the last time you called me Mom?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I love you, Emma," I said, knowing it might be the last time I ever said those words to her. "I've loved you since the moment I met you, and I'll love you until the day I die. That will never change, no matter what you call me." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to curl up in my lap for bedtime stories. But then her face hardened again. "I love you too, Katrina. But I have to focus on my family now." Her family. The family that no longer included me. I drove home that night knowing that I had lost her completely. Not to tragedy or death, but to something far more cruel, to the woman who had given birth to her, but had never been her mother. The next few months were a special kind of hell. I would drive by Emma's house sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of the boys playing in the yard. I kept their Christmas presents in my closet, waiting for an invitation that never came. I saved newspaper clippings about their school events, activities I was no longer invited to attend. My friends and neighbors, bless their hearts, didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone who has lost their child to their child's choice? "Maybe she'll come around," they'd say. "Maybe she's just going through a phase." But I knew better. Emma had found what she believed was her real family, and I was no longer part of it. The final blow came on Mother's Day. I woke up that morning with a small hope that maybe, just maybe, Emma would call. We had never missed a Mother's Day in 23 years. Even during her most rebellious teenage years, she had always found a way to make the day special. The phone never rang, but social media lit up with photos of Emma and Lisa having brunch at an expensive restaurant, laughing and hugging like old friends. The caption read, "Celebrating my first Mother's Day with my amazing mom. So grateful for second chances and the love that never died." The love that never died. While the love that had sustained Emma for 23 years was apparently not worth acknowledging. I spent that Mother's Day alone, looking through photo albums of Emma's childhood. Pictures of her first day of school, her ballet recitals, her graduation, her wedding. A lifetime of memories that now felt like they belonged to someone else. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being a victim. I was done begging for scraps of affection from a daughter who had decided I wasn't worth her time. I was done being the cast-off mother who had served her purpose and was no longer needed. If Emma wanted to pretend that Lisa was her real mother, that was her choice. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background. I wasn't going to let 23 years of love and sacrifice be erased without a fight. I was going to make sure that one day, Emma would understand exactly what she had thrown away. And when that day came, I would be the one with the power to choose whether to forgive. But first, I had to find a way to make her notice me again. I had to become someone she couldn't ignore, someone she couldn't dismiss as just Katrina, the woman who had happened to raise her. I had to become someone who mattered. The first step in my transformation was admitting a truth I had been avoiding for months. I was completely and utterly alone. At 57 years old, I had built my entire identity around being Emma's mother. Now that she was gone, I had to figure out who Katrina Walsh was supposed to be. The silence in my house was deafening. For 23 years, it had been filled with Emma's laughter, her phone calls, her children's giggles during sleepovers. Now it was just me and the echoes of a life that no longer existed. I started by cleaning out Emma's old room, which I had kept as a shrine to her childhood. The pink walls, the stuffed animals, the trophies from soccer tournaments, all of it had to go. I donated her clothes to charity, threw away the art projects I had saved for decades, and painted the walls a neutral beige. "Are you sure about this, honey?" my neighbor Margaret asked when she saw me loading boxes into my car. "Maybe Emma might want some of these things someday." "Emma has everything she needs," I replied, my voice steady. "She has her real mother now." Margaret looked like she wanted to say more, but she wisely stayed quiet. The next step was acknowledging that I had spent the last 23 years putting everyone else's needs before my own. I had worked at the same insurance company for 15 years, not because I loved it, but because it provided stability for Emma. I had lived in the same modest house, driven the same reliable car, and saved every penny for Emma's future. Now, for the first time in decades, I could put myself first. I started small. I bought myself new clothes, not the practical, mom-friendly outfits I had worn for years, but clothes that made me feel attractive and confident. I got my hair cut and colored, traded my sensible shoes for heels, and invested in makeup that made me look 10 years younger. The physical transformation was just the beginning. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the community college, something I had always wanted to do, but never had time for. I had always been a good storyteller. Emma used to love the bedtime stories I'd make up for her, but I had never considered writing as anything more than a hobby. "What kind of stories do you want to tell?" my instructor, Professor Martinez, asked during our first class. "Stories about betrayal," I said without hesitation. "Stories about people who think they can use others and throw them away without consequences." Professor Martinez raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like you have some personal experience with that theme." "You could say that," I replied. Writing became my outlet, my therapy, my weapon. I poured all of my pain, anger, and determination onto the page. I wrote about mothers who sacrificed everything for ungrateful children, about families torn apart by greed and manipulation, about the sweet taste of revenge served cold. My first story was about a woman named Catherine who raised her adopted daughter with nothing but love, only to watch that daughter abandon her for a wealthy birth mother who had never shown an ounce of interest in her child. In my story, Catherine became a successful novelist who used her platform to expose the truth about fair-weather families and the people who enable them. "This is powerful stuff," Professor Martinez said after reading my first submission. "Have you considered trying to publish this?" "I'm not ready yet," I said. "But someday I will be." While I was discovering my talent for writing, I was also discovering something else. I was capable of being happy without Emma. For the first time in decades, I wasn't walking on eggshells, worried about disappointing someone or failing to meet impossible expectations. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, and make decisions based solely on what made me happy. I started traveling, something I had never done because Emma had always needed me for something. I went to New York City and fell in love with the energy and possibility of the city. I visited Paris and understood why Emma had been so excited about her trip with Lisa. I took a cruise through the Mediterranean and realized that the world was full of beautiful things I had never seen because I had been too busy being a mother to someone who no longer wanted me. Each trip gave me material for my writing. I wrote about the lonely businesswoman who found love in a Parisian cafe, about the divorcee who discovered her strength while hiking through Tuscany, about the cast-off mother who reinvented herself as a world traveler and best-selling author. That last story was my favorite because it was the one I was living. 2 years after Emma had erased me from her life, I finished my first novel. It was a thinly veiled version of my own story, but with a twist. The abandoned mother becomes wildly successful and uses her platform to expose the truth about ungrateful children and the parents who enable them. The book was called The Mother Who Gave Everything, and it was brutal in its honesty. I didn't soften the edges or make the characters more sympathetic than they deserved to be. The daughter in my story was selfish, the birth mother was manipulative, and the adopted mother was a victim who refused to stay down. "This is going to be controversial," my editor warned me when I submitted the manuscript. "A lot of people aren't going to like the way you portray adoption and family relationships." "Good," I replied. "I'm not trying to make people comfortable. I'm trying to tell the truth." The book was picked up by a small publisher who specialized in women's fiction. They didn't offer me a big advance or promise bestseller status, but they believed in the story, and they believed in me. The Mother Who Gave Everything was published on a Tuesday in October, 3 years after Emma had cut me out of her life. I didn't tell anyone about it, not my neighbors, not my former coworkers, not even my writing class. I wanted to see if the book could succeed on its own merit. It started slowly. A few reviews here and there, mostly positive. Readers connected with the raw emotion and brutal honesty of the story. They saw themselves in the abandoned mother, or they recognized family members in the ungrateful daughter. Then something magical happened. A popular book blogger with over 100,000 followers discovered my novel and wrote a review that changed everything. I couldn't put this book down. Katrina Walsh has written a masterpiece about the dark side of family relationships that no one wants to talk about. This isn't a feel-good story about forgiveness and redemption. This is a raw, honest look at what happens when love isn't enough and sacrifice isn't appreciated. Every mother who has ever felt taken for granted needs to read this book. The review went viral. Within a week, The Mother Who Gave Everything was selling thousands of copies. Book clubs were choosing it for their monthly selections. Online forums were debating whether the mother or daughter was more sympathetic. Most importantly, people were talking about it. Real mothers were sharing their own stories of ungrateful children. Adopted children were questioning their relationships with their birth parents. Families were having difficult conversations about loyalty, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be a parent. My publisher was thrilled. "We need to get you on some podcasts," they said. Maybe some local TV appearances. This book is taking off, and we need to capitalize on the momentum. But I wasn't ready for that yet. I was still building my arsenal, still preparing for the day when Emma would finally notice that I existed. Because she would notice. Eventually, inevitably, she would hear about the book. Someone would mention it to her, or she would see it in a bookstore window, or one of her friends would recommend it. And when she did, she would recognize herself in every page. She would realize that while she had been playing happy families with Lisa, I had been documenting every moment of her betrayal. Every cruel word, every thoughtless action, every time she had chosen her birth mother over the woman who had raised her. All of it was there in black and white for the world to see. The success of my first book gave me the confidence to write my second. This one was called Blood Doesn't Make You Family, and it was even more brutal than the first. It followed the same characters 5 years later, showing how the daughter's relationship with her birth mother had deteriorated once the novelty wore off. In my fictional world, the birth mother turned out to be exactly what she had always been, a selfish, unstable woman who was more interested in playing the role of devoted mother than actually being one. The daughter, now older and wiser, began to realize what she had thrown away, but by then it was too late. The adopted mother had moved on, built a new life, and was no longer interested in being anyone's backup plan. "This is even better than your first book," my editor told me. "You're really hitting your stride as a writer. Have you thought about this becoming a series?" "I have plenty more stories to tell," I replied. "This is just the beginning." By the time my third book came out, I was no longer a small-time author with a modest following. I was a best-selling novelist with a devoted fan base and a platform that reached millions of people. My books were being translated into other languages, optioned for movies, and discussed in literary circles. The media loved me because I wasn't afraid to say what other people were thinking. I gave interviews about the dark side of adoption, the myth of unconditional love, and the importance of boundaries in family relationships. "A lot of people are going to call you bitter," one interviewer said during a particularly intense podcast appearance. "Let them," I replied. "I'd rather be bitter than broken. I'd rather be angry than invisible." The interview went viral. "I'd rather be bitter than broken" became a rallying cry for women who had been taken for granted by their families. It was printed on t-shirts, shared on social media, and quoted in other articles about family dysfunction. I was becoming more than just a successful author. I was becoming a voice for every mother who had ever been replaced, every parent who had ever been discarded, every person who had ever been made to feel invisible by the people they loved most. And through it all, I waited for Emma to notice. 5 years after she had erased me from her life, I was finally ready for her to find me again. I was no longer the broken woman who had begged for scraps of affection. I was Katrina Walsh, best-selling author, respected voice in the literary world, and the woman who had turned her greatest pain into her greatest triumph. I was ready for Emma to realize exactly what she had thrown away. And when she did, I would be the one with the power to decide whether she was worth my time. The call came on a Thursday evening in November, exactly 5 years and 8 months after Emma had cut me out of her life. I was at my writing desk, working on my 4th novel, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Katrina? This is Emma." I almost didn't recognize her voice. It was smaller somehow, less confident than the woman who had told me I wasn't her real mother. "Emma," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "What a surprise. I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere? Please?" The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. After 5 years of silence, she was calling me with pleas in her voice. "I'm quite busy these days," I replied, glancing at my calendar that was filled with book signings, interviews, and speaking engagements. "My schedule is pretty packed." "I know about the books," she said quietly. "I've read them. All of them." There it was, the recognition I had been waiting for. Have you? I asked, maintaining my calm tone. And what did you think? I think we need to talk. I let the silence stretch between us, savoring the moment. For 5 years, I had been the one begging for her attention. Now she was the one asking for mine. I suppose I could find some time, I said finally. There's a cafe downtown called the Literary Bean. Do you know it? I'll find it. Friday at 2 p.m. Don't be late. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding with anticipation. The moment I had been building toward for 5 years was finally here. The Literary Bean was a small, intimate cafe that had become popular with writers and book lovers. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and there was a display case near the entrance featuring local authors. My 3 novels were prominently displayed, along with my author photo and a small placard describing me as the voice of every mother who has ever been taken for granted. I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where we could have privacy. I ordered a coffee and opened my laptop, making it look like I was working. When Emma walked in, I pretended not to notice her immediately. She looked older, I realized. The stress of the past few years had aged her more than they had aged me. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired, and she moved with none of the confidence she had possessed during our last meeting. Katrina? I looked up from my laptop with mild interest, as if I had barely noticed her arrival.
Emma.
You look well. She didn't, and we both knew it. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I wasn't sure you would. I'm curious about what you have to say, I replied. It's been quite a while since we last spoke. 5 years, 8 months, and 12 days, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. You've been counting? I've been counting since the day I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life. Interesting. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. And when was that? I asked. Emma's eyes filled with tears. The day I read your first book. I took a sip of my coffee, saying nothing. I saw it in a bookstore window, she continued. I almost didn't buy it because I recognized the author photo. But something made me pick it up, and when I started reading... She paused, wiping her eyes. I saw myself in every page. The ungrateful daughter, the selfish choices, the way I threw away the best thing in my life for someone who never really wanted me. It's fiction, I said simply. Is it? She asked. Because every word felt like you were writing about us. About what I did to you. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. Tell me about Lisa. Emma's face crumpled. She left, she whispered. 2 years ago. She got bored with playing grandmother and moved to Florida with her husband. She sends birthday cards to the boys, but she hasn't visited since she left. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though I felt no sympathy at all. No, you're not, Emma said, looking directly at me. And you shouldn't be. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I was so caught up in the fantasy of having my real mother that I threw away the woman who actually raised me. And now you want me back because your first choice didn't work out? The words hit her like a physical blow. That's not. She struggled to find words. I know how this looks. I know you have every right to hate me. I don't hate you, Emma, I said truthfully. I'm completely indifferent to you. That was a lie, but it was the right thing to say. I could see the words cut through her like a knife. Please, she said, her voice breaking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone.
But I need you to know that I understand now.
I understand what I threw away. Do you? I asked. Tell me what you understand. I understand that you were my real mother, she said, tears streaming down her face. You were the one who stayed up all night when I was sick, who taught me to drive, who held me when my heart was broken. You were the one who sacrificed everything for me, and I repaid you by deciding you weren't good enough because you didn't give birth to me. Go on, I said, unmoved by her tears. I understand that Lisa was never my mother. She was a stranger who shared my DNA, but she never earned the right to be called my mom. She left me when I was 3, and she left me again when I was 35. But you chose me every single day for 23 years, and I threw that away like it meant nothing. It did mean nothing, I said.
To you.
No, Emma said desperately. It meant everything. It means everything. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. What do you want from me, Emma? I want another chance, she said. I want to be your daughter again. I want the boys to know their real grandmother. I want us to be a family again. The boys, I said thoughtfully. How old are they now? Jackson is 11 and Michael is 9. They ask about you all the time. Do they? I asked. Or are you just saying that to manipulate me? Emma flinched. They do. They remember you. They remember Grammy Katrina, who made the best cookies and told the best stories.
They want to see you.
And David? How does he feel about your sudden desire to reconnect? David never wanted me to cut you out, Emma admitted. He thought I was making a mistake from the beginning. He said Lisa was using me, but I wouldn't listen. I thought he was jealous. Smart man, I said. You should have listened to him. I know that now. I know a lot of things now that I wish I had known then. I finished my coffee and looked at my watch. I have another appointment, I said, standing up. Wait, Emma said desperately. What do I have to do? How do I fix this? I looked down at her, taking in her desperation, her tears, her complete vulnerability. 5 years ago, this moment would have been everything I wanted. I would have forgiven her instantly, welcomed her back into my life with open arms, and pretended that none of the hurt had ever happened. But I was a different person now. I was stronger, more successful, and far less willing to be anyone's second choice. You can't fix this, I said simply. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. There's nothing you can do, I replied. You made your choice 5 years ago. You chose Lisa over me, and you told me I wasn't your real mother. Well, congratulations, Emma. You were right. I'm not your real mother. I'm just the woman who wasted 23 years of her life raising an ungrateful child. I walked toward the door, but Emma followed me. Katrina, please. I'm begging you. I turned back to face her. You're begging me? The woman who isn't your real mother? The woman you erased from your life, like I never existed. I was wrong, she sobbed. I was so wrong about everything. Yes, you were, I agreed. But being wrong doesn't entitle you to forgiveness. I left her standing in the cafe, crying into her hands. As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete and total power. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I was the one in control. Emma had spent 5 years learning what it felt like to be abandoned by someone she loved. Now she was learning what it felt like to beg for someone's attention and be ignored. And I was just getting started. 6 months after our meeting at the Literary Bean, I was in New York City for a book signing when I received an unexpected package. It was delivered to my hotel room with no return address, just my name written in Emma's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a homemade card, the kind I remembered her making for me when she was little. The front was decorated with glitter and stickers, and inside was a child's drawing of a woman with gray hair and a big smile. At the bottom, in a 9-year-old's careful handwriting, were the words, "I miss you, Grammy." Below that, in Emma's adult handwriting, was a message. Michael drew this for you. He remembers you teaching him to color inside the lines.
Please call me
Emma. I stared at the card for a long time, remembering the little boy who used to sit at my kitchen table with his tongue sticking out in concentration as he worked on his art projects. But I didn't call. 2 weeks later, another package arrived. This one contained a school photo of Jackson in his soccer uniform, along with a note. Jackson made the All-Star team. He said he wishes Grammy Katrina could come to his games like she used to. The championship is next month. I know you probably won't come, but I wanted you to know you're invited. I threw the photo in the trash without a second thought. The packages kept coming. Photos of the boys at school events, copies of their report cards, drawings they had made for me. Each one came with a note from Emma, begging me to reconsider, to give her another chance, to let her prove that she had changed. I ignored them all. My fourth book, When Blood Runs Cold, was released that fall and immediately shot to #1 on the bestseller list. It was my darkest work yet, exploring what happens when family loyalty is tested and found wanting. The protagonist was a successful woman who had been betrayed by her adopted daughter, and her revenge was swift and brutal. The book tour was a massive success. I appeared on talk shows, was interviewed by major magazines, and spoke at literary events across the country. Everywhere I went, women came up to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving voice to their pain. "You wrote my story," they would say. "You made me feel less alone." I was at the height of my success, living a life that Emma could never have imagined for the woman she had dismissed as just Katrina. I had money, fame, respect, and influence. I had built an empire on the foundation of her betrayal. It was during a book signing in Chicago that I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. David, Emma's husband, was standing at the back of the room, looking uncomfortable but determined. After the signing, he approached me hesitantly. "Katrina? I don't know if you remember me." "I remember you, David," I said coolly. "You're Emma's husband." "I am," he said. "I was wondering if I could talk to you for a minute." I glanced at my watch. "I have a flight to catch." "Please," he said. "It's about the boys." That got my attention. I gestured to a quiet corner of the bookstore. "What about the boys?" I asked. David looked exhausted, older than his years. "They're struggling," he said. "They remember you, Katrina. They ask about you constantly. They want to know why Grammy Katrina doesn't love them anymore." "I never stopped loving them," I said. "Their mother made the choice to cut me out of their lives." "I know," David said. "And I told her it was a mistake from the beginning. I tried to get her to reconsider, but she was so caught up in Lisa's manipulation that she couldn't see what she was doing. And now she's heartbroken. She cries every night. She's been to therapy, she's read every one of your books, and she knows what she did was unforgivable. But those boys, they're innocent in all of this. They just want their grandmother back." I studied David's face, seeing the genuine pain there. "What do you want from me?" "Jackson's birthday is next month," he said. "He's turning 12. Emma wanted to invite you, but she's too afraid you'll say no. Or worse, that you'll say yes and then use it as an opportunity to hurt her." "Would I do that?" I asked. "I don't know," David admitted. "The woman who raised Emma wouldn't have. But the woman who wrote those books, I'm not sure what she's capable of." I smiled at that. "You're very perceptive, David. Will you come?" he asked. "Not for Emma, but for Jackson?" He still has that picture of you and him at his 6th birthday party on his nightstand. I remembered that picture. Jackson had insisted on wearing his superhero costume, and I had let him put his cape on me too. We were both grinning at the camera, completely happy in that moment. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I can ask," David replied. "But Katrina, if you do come, please don't use it as a weapon. Don't use those boys to hurt Emma. They've been through enough." I didn't make any promises. 2 weeks later, I received a formal invitation in the mail. It was obviously made by Jackson himself, with crooked letters and pictures drawn in the margins. The message was simple: Please come to my birthday party, Grammy Katrina. I promise it will be fun. I stared at the invitation for hours, remembering all the birthday parties I had missed, all the milestones I hadn't been there to celebrate. For 5 years, I had been erased from their lives as completely as if I had never existed. But now they were inviting me back. The question was, did I want to go as the loving grandmother I had once been, or as the successful, powerful woman I had become? Did I want to heal the wounds or salt them? I thought about Emma, crying herself to sleep every night, finally understanding what she had thrown away. I thought about the years of silence, the deliberate erasure, the casual cruelty of being told I wasn't her real mother. I thought about Lisa, who had swooped in to claim credit for Emma's success and then disappeared when the novelty wore off. I thought about how easily Emma had been manipulated, how quickly she had discarded 23 years of love for the fantasy of a perfect birth mother. Most of all, I thought about the power I now held. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I was the one with choices to make. I could ignore the invitation and continue my new life, or I could accept it and finally confront the woman who had destroyed our family. I made my decision. I would go to Jackson's party. But I wasn't going as the forgiving grandmother who would make everything better. I was going as Katrina Walsh, best-selling author, successful businesswoman, and the woman who had risen from the ashes of Emma's betrayal. I was going to show Emma exactly what she had lost, and I was going to make sure she understood that some mistakes can never be undone. The invitation said the party started at 2 p.m. I arrived at 2:30, fashionably late and impeccably dressed. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a designer dress that cost more than Emma's monthly mortgage, jewelry that sparkled in the afternoon sun, and an air of confidence that came from knowing I was the most important person in the room. I could see Emma through the window, frantically checking her phone and watching the door. She looked older, more tired, and completely out of her league. When she saw me walking up the front path, her face went through a range of emotions: relief, terror, hope, and resignation. "You came," she breathed when she opened the door. "I said I would think about it," I replied, stepping past her into the house. I thought about it. The house was beautiful, I had to admit. Much nicer than the modest home where I had raised Emma. Lisa's money had bought them a lifestyle I never could have provided. "Jackson," Emma called out. "Grammy Katrina is here." I heard footsteps thundering down the stairs, and then Jackson appeared, tall, gangly, and so much older than the little boy I remembered. For a moment, he just stared at me, uncertain. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my voice softening despite myself. "Grammy," he said tentatively. "Is it really you?" "It's really me," I confirmed. He ran to me then, throwing his arms around my waist with the enthusiasm of a child who had been waiting years for this moment. Despite everything, despite all my anger and planning, I felt my heart crack a little. "I missed you so much," he whispered into my dress. "I missed you too, baby," I whispered back and meant it. Michael appeared next, shyer than his brother, but just as hungry for affection. Soon I had both boys clinging to me, telling me about school and friends, and all the things they had wanted to share with me for 5 years. Emma stood in the doorway, watching with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. But I wasn't there to make her feel better. I was there to make her understand exactly what she had thrown away. The party was small, just a few family friends and neighbors. But it was clear that I was the guest of honor, at least in Jackson's eyes. He insisted I sit next to him, wanted to show me every gift he received, and kept checking to make sure I was still there. "Are you going to leave again?" he asked during a quiet moment. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "That depends on a lot of things." "I hope you don't," he said. "I like having you here." As the afternoon wore on, I watched Emma struggle with having me in her space. She was clearly walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do anything that might set me off. She kept trying to catch my eye, to have a moment alone to talk, but I expertly avoided her attempts. When it came time to cut the cake, Jackson insisted that I help him blow out the candles. "Make a wish with me, Grammy," he said. I closed my eyes and made my wish. I wished for Emma to understand, truly understand, what she had lost. I wished for her to spend the rest of her life knowing that her greatest mistake had been throwing away the one person who had loved her unconditionally. When I opened my eyes, Emma was staring at me with a mixture of hope and terror. "What did you wish for?" Jackson asked. "I wished for truth," I said, looking directly at Emma. "I wished for people to get exactly what they deserve." Emma's face went pale, but she said nothing. As the party began to wind down, Emma finally cornered me in the kitchen. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "It means everything to Jackson. To all of us." "I came for Jackson," I replied. "And Michael, not for you." "I know," she said. "But I hope this might be the beginning of something. A chance for us to rebuild." I set down my coffee cup and looked at her directly. "Emma, do you remember what you said to me the last time we had lunch together?" Her face crumpled. "Katrina, I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. You said I wasn't your real mother," I continued. "You said Lisa was your real mother because she gave birth to you. Do you remember that?" "Yes," she whispered. "And I hate myself for it." "Good," I said. "Because you were right. I'm not your real mother. I'm just the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who loved you unconditionally for 23 years. I'm just the woman you threw away like garbage when something better came along." "Please," she begged. "I know I hurt you. I know I can't undo what I did. But I'm asking for another chance." "Another chance?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Emma, do you know what I've accomplished in the 5 years since you erased me from your life?" She nodded miserably. "I know about the books, the success, everything. I'm proud of you." "Proud of me?" I repeated. "You're proud of me? That's rich, Emma. You're proud of the woman whose pain you caused, whose story you became, whose betrayal made me famous." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know I'm the villain in your story. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But those boys need you. They need their grandmother." "They needed me 5 years ago, too," I replied. "But their mother decided Lisa was more important." "I was wrong," Emma said desperately. "I was so wrong, and I've paid for it every day since. Lisa left, Katrina. She got bored and left, just like you said she would. She sends birthday cards twice a year, and that's it. She never loved me. She never really wanted to be my mother." "And now you want me to be your backup plan?" I asked. "You want me to come running back because your first choice didn't work out?" "No," Emma said quickly. "It's not about that. It's about recognizing that you were always my real mother. You were always the one who mattered. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it." I studied her face, seeing the genuine remorse there. 5 years ago, this conversation would have ended with me forgiving her and welcoming her back into my life. But 5 years ago, I was a different person. I was a broken woman who would have taken any scraps of affection Emma was willing to give me. Now I was Katrina Walsh, best-selling author and successful businesswoman. I was the woman who had turned her greatest pain into her greatest triumph. I was the woman who had the power to choose whether Emma deserved a second chance. And I had already made my choice. "Emma," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I want you to understand something important." She nodded eagerly, hope blooming in her eyes. "I don't forgive you," I said. "I will never forgive you. You didn't just hurt me, Emma. You destroyed me. You took 23 years of love and sacrifice and threw it away like it meant nothing. You chose a stranger over the woman who raised you, and then you had the audacity to tell me I wasn't your real mother." Her hope died in her eyes, replaced by devastating realization. "I've built a new life," I continued. "I'm successful, I'm happy, and I'm surrounded by people who appreciate me. I don't need you anymore, Emma. I don't need your apologies or your guilt or your desperate attempts to make things right." "But the boys," she started. "The boys are your responsibility," I interrupted. "You chose to cut me out of their lives. You chose to deprive them of their grandmother."
That's on you, not me.
"Please," she whispered. "I'm begging you." "I know you are," I said. "And 5 years ago, that would have been enough. But you taught me something important, Emma. You taught me that love isn't always enough. You taught me that sacrifice isn't always appreciated. You taught me that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the worst." I picked up my purse and headed for the door. "Thank you for inviting me to Jackson's party," I said formally. "It was lovely to see the boys again." "Wait," Emma called after me. "What do I tell them? What do I tell Jackson and Michael?" I paused at the door and looked back at her. "Tell them the truth," I said. "Tell them that actions have consequences. Tell them that some mistakes can't be undone. Tell them that sometimes the people we love choose to walk away and there's nothing we can do to stop them." "That's what you did to me," she said quietly. "You chose to walk away. You chose to push me away. There's a difference." I left her standing in her beautiful house, surrounded by the remnants of her son's birthday party, finally understanding what it felt like to be the one who was left behind. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete and total satisfaction. Emma had finally learned what it felt like to be abandoned by someone she loved. She had finally learned what it felt like to beg for someone's attention and be ignored. And I was just getting started. The months following Jackson's birthday party brought a new level of success to my career. When Blood Runs Cold had been optioned for a movie deal, and I was invited to speak at conferences about family dynamics and the psychology of betrayal. My publisher was pushing for a fifth book, and literary agents were calling with offers for multi-book deals. But more importantly, I was becoming a cultural phenomenon. My story, the abandoned mother who had risen from the ashes of her daughter's betrayal, was resonating with people all over the world. I was featured on magazine covers, interviewed by major news outlets, and invited to appear on talk shows. The interview that changed everything was with Sandra Morrison, host of the most popular daytime talk show in America. Sandra was known for her tough questions and her ability to get to the heart of difficult family situations. "Katrina Walsh," she said, introducing me to her audience of millions. "The woman who turned her greatest heartbreak into her greatest triumph. Welcome to the show." The audience applauded as I walked onto the stage, confident and composed in my designer dress. I had learned to command attention, to own my space, to make people listen when I spoke. "Thank you for having me, Sandra," I said, settling into the plush chair across from her. "Your story is remarkable," Sandra began. "You raised an adopted daughter for 23 years, only to have her abandon you when her birth mother reappeared. Tell us about that pain." I had told this story dozens of times by now, but I never got tired of it. Each telling was an opportunity to show the world what Emma had done, to make sure everyone understood who was the victim and who was the villain. "The pain was indescribable," I said, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Imagine giving everything you have to someone, your time, your money, your heart, your dreams, and then watching them throw it all away for a stranger. Imagine being told that 23 years of love doesn't matter because you didn't give birth to that child." The audience murmured sympathetically. "Your daughter Emma hasn't spoken publicly about this situation," Sandra continued. "What do you think she would say if she were here today?" I smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach my eyes. "I think she would say she's sorry." I think she would say she made a mistake. I think she would beg for another chance. And would you give her one? No, I said without hesitation. Some mistakes are too big to forgive. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Emma made her choice, and now she has to live with the consequences. The audience was silent, absorbing the finality of my words. But what about your grandchildren?
Sandra asked.
Don't you miss them? For the first time, my composure cracked slightly. Of course I miss them, I said. They were innocent victims in all of this, but their mother chose to cut me out of their lives. She chose to deprive them of their grandmother. That's not my fault. Some people would say that you're punishing the children for their mother's mistakes, Sandra pressed. Some people would be wrong. I replied firmly. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply refusing to be someone's backup plan. I'm refusing to be the grandmother they turn to when their first choice doesn't work out. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Sandra asking increasingly pointed questions about forgiveness, family, and the responsibility we have to the people who love us. I answered each question with the same unwavering certainty. Emma had made her choice, and I had made mine. When the interview aired, it became one of the most watched episodes in the show's history. The audience was divided. Some people praised me for standing up for myself and refusing to be a doormat, while others criticized me for being cold and unforgiving. But everyone was talking about it. Social media exploded with debates about my story. Hashtag Team Katrina and hashtag Team Emma hashtags trended for weeks. Think pieces were written about the nature of family, the limits of forgiveness, and the cost of second chances. Most importantly, Emma was forced to watch as her story was dissected by millions of strangers. She had to see herself portrayed as the ungrateful daughter who had thrown away a mother's love for a fantasy that had crumbled. I received thousands of messages from viewers after the interview aired. Most were supportive, praising me for my strength and refusing to accept Emma's behavior. But some were from people who had been through similar situations, adopted children who had reunited with birth parents, adoptive parents who had been abandoned, families torn apart by the same dynamics that had destroyed mine. One message stood out from the rest. It was from a woman named Patricia, whose adopted son had cut her off after reconnecting with his birth father. I watched your interview with tears streaming down my face, she wrote. You said everything I've been feeling, but couldn't put into words. Thank you for showing me that I'm not alone and that I don't have to accept being treated like I don't matter. You've inspired me to rebuild my life instead of waiting for my son to remember that I exist. That message, and dozens like it, confirmed what I had suspected all along. My story wasn't just about Emma and me. It was about every parent who had been taken for granted, every person who had been replaced by someone better, every individual who had been made to feel invisible by the people they loved most. I was becoming more than just a successful author. I was becoming a symbol of survival, a voice for the voiceless, a woman who had refused to disappear quietly into the background. But Emma wasn't going to disappear quietly either. 2 weeks after the Sandra Morrison interview, I received a call from my publicist. Katrina, we have a situation, she said, her voice tense. Emma has written an open letter to you. It's being published in several major newspapers tomorrow. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of letter? A public apology. A very detailed, very emotional public apology. She's not holding anything back. She's admitting to everything you've accused her of and more. I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Emma was finally acknowledging publicly what she had done to me. But I also knew that a public apology could be a powerful tool for winning sympathy. Send me a copy, I said. The letter arrived in my email an hour later. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, and devastating in its honesty. Dear Katrina, it began. I know you may never read this, and I know you probably won't care even if you do. But I need to say these words publicly, where everyone can see them, because the world needs to know the truth about what I did to you. 5 years ago, I committed the most unforgivable act a daughter can commit. I abandoned the woman who raised me for a stranger who shared my DNA. I told you that you weren't my real mother, that Lisa was more important to me because she had given birth to me. I erased 23 years of your love and sacrifice with a few cruel words, and I convinced myself that I was justified in doing so. I was wrong. I was so completely, utterly wrong that I don't have words to express the depth of my regret. You were my real mother, Katrina. You were the one who held me when I had nightmares about my early childhood. You were the one who taught me to ride a bike, to bake cookies, to believe in myself. You were the one who cheered at every soccer game, cried at my graduation, and walked me down the aisle at my wedding. You were the one who chose me every single day for 23 years, and I repaid that devotion by choosing someone else the moment I had the chance. Lisa left me, just like you said she would. She got bored with playing mother and grandmother and moved across the country. She sends birthday cards twice a year and calls at Christmas if I'm lucky. She was never my mother. She was a stranger who manipulated me into believing that biology mattered more than love. But you know what the worst part is? The worst part is that I knew, even as I was pushing you away, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I knew that you were irreplaceable, that what we had was special, that I was throwing away something precious for something fake. I knew, and I did it anyway. I can't ask for your forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I can't ask for another chance because I already had 23 years of chances, and I threw them all away. All I can do is tell the world what I should have told you every day for 23 years, that you were the best mother any child could ask for, and that losing you was the worst thing that has ever happened to me. My sons ask about you every day. They want to know why Grammy Katrina doesn't love them anymore, why you never visit, why you won't answer their letters. I tell them the truth, that their mother hurt you so badly that you can't bear to be around us anymore. They cry when I tell them this, and so do I. I've read all of your books, Katrina. I've seen myself in every page, and I've understood exactly what I put you through. I'm proud of your success, even though I know I have no right to be. You turned your pain into something beautiful and powerful, and you've helped thousands of people who have been through similar situations. I just wish that success hadn't come at the cost of our relationship. I love you, Katrina. I will always love you. You will always be my real mother, even if I'm no longer your daughter. Emma. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions swirling between satisfaction and something that might have been grief. Emma had finally admitted everything, her selfishness, her manipulation, her complete betrayal of everything we had built together. She had laid herself bare for the world to see, admitting that she had been wrong about everything. But it was too late. 5 years too late. The letter was published the next morning in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and a dozen other major newspapers. By noon, it was trending on social media. By evening, it had been shared millions of times. The public reaction was immediate and intense. #Emma's letter became a trending topic, with people debating whether her apology was genuine or just another manipulation. Some praised her for taking responsibility for her actions, while others pointed out that apologizing publicly was a way of putting pressure on me to forgive her. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. Everyone wanted to know how I felt about Emma's letter, whether it changed anything, whether I was considering reconciliation. I gave one interview to Sandra Morrison, who had me back on her show for an emergency episode. Katrina, Sandra said, the whole world has read Emma's letter. What's your reaction? I had prepared for this question, had rehearsed my answer until it was perfect. My reaction is that Emma is very good with words, I said calmly. She always has been.
But words are easy, Sandra.
Words don't undo 5 years of silence. Words don't bring back the grandchildren's birthday parties I missed, the holidays I spent alone, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I had done wrong. But don't you think her letter shows genuine remorse? Sandra pressed. I think her letter shows that she's finally experiencing consequences for her actions, I replied. For 5 years, Emma lived her life without me in it. She had her birth mother, her new lifestyle, her perfect family. And now that Lisa is gone and the fantasy has crumbled, she wants me back. So, you don't believe her apology is sincere? I believe Emma is sorry, I said. I believe she regrets her choices. But being sorry doesn't entitle her to forgiveness. Regretting your choices doesn't undo the damage they caused. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Emma says in her letter that she knew she was making a mistake even as she was doing it, Sandra continued. Doesn't that make her actions worse, not better? Exactly, I said. She knew what she was doing. She knew she was hurting me, and she did it anyway. That makes her betrayal even more unforgivable. What would you say to people who think you're being too harsh? That everyone deserves a second chance. I looked directly into the camera, knowing that Emma would be watching. I would say that Emma had 23 years of chances, I said. She had 23 years to appreciate what she had, to value our relationship, to understand that love is more important than biology. She chose to throw all of that away for a fantasy. That was her choice to make, and now living with the consequences is her cross to bear. The interview ended with Sandra asking if there was anything I wanted to say directly to Emma. Yes, I said, still looking into the camera. Emma, if you're watching this, I want you to know that I heard every word of your letter. I understand that you're sorry, and I believe that your regret is genuine. But I also want you to understand that some things can't be fixed with words. Some relationships, once broken, can't be repaired. You taught me that when you told me I wasn't your real mother. You taught me that when you chose Lisa over me. You taught me that when you erased me from your life, like I had never existed. I paused, letting the words sink in. You were right when you said I wasn't your real mother, I continued. I was just the woman who raised you. And now you're just the child I used to know. We're strangers now, Emma, and that's how it's going to stay. The interview went viral within hours. The hashtag strangers now became a rallying cry for people who had been betrayed by family members. My words were quoted in articles about the limits of forgiveness and the importance of consequences. But most importantly, Emma finally understood that her public apology had accomplished nothing. She had humiliated herself on a national stage, admitted to the world that she was a selfish, ungrateful daughter, and I had responded by confirming that our relationship was truly over. She had played her last card, and it hadn't been enough. 6 months after Emma's public letter, I was approached by a major television network about doing a documentary series. They wanted to explore my story in depth, interviewing everyone involved and showing the real-world impact of family betrayal. We want to call it The Mother Who Fought Back, the producer explained during our meeting. It would be a 6-part series, following your journey from abandoned mother to best-selling author. We'd interview you, of course, but also your friends, your publisher, people who've been inspired by your story. What about Emma? I asked. Would you interview her? We'd like to, the producer admitted. We think it would be powerful to hear her side of the story, to see the regret she's living with. But we wouldn't do it without your approval. I thought about it for a moment. Emma appearing on the documentary could generate sympathy for her, could make people see her as a victim of her own poor choices rather than the villain of my story. But it could also provide the perfect opportunity for her to humiliate herself even further. I'll agree to the documentary on one condition, I said. I want editorial control over how Emma is portrayed. If she's going to tell her side of the story, I want to make sure the audience understands exactly what kind of person she is. The producer looked uncomfortable. Katrina, we can't give you complete editorial control. That would compromise the integrity of the documentary. Then there's no documentary, I said, standing up to leave. Wait, the producer said quickly. Let me talk to my team. Maybe we can work something out. A week later, they came back with a compromise. I wouldn't have editorial control, but I would have input on how my story was told. I would be able to review footage before it aired and make suggestions about context and framing. More importantly, they agreed to structure the documentary in a way that clearly established Emma as the antagonist of the story. They would interview her, but they would also interview the people she had hurt, me, David, even the boys if I agreed. The boys? I asked, surprised. Jackson is 14 now, Michael is 12, the producer explained. They're old enough to understand what happened and to talk about how it affected them. It could be powerful to hear from the real victims in this situation. I agreed to the documentary. Filming began 3 months later. The production team was respectful and professional, treating my story with the gravity it deserved. They interviewed me extensively, asking about my childhood, my marriage to Robert, my years as a foster parent, and the joy of adopting Emma. They filmed me in my beautiful new home, surrounded by awards and accolades from my writing career. They showed me at book signings, speaking to audiences who hung on my every word. They captured me at the height of my success, living a life that was richer and more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined when I was just Emma's mom. Do you ever regret how things turned out? The interviewer asked during one session. I considered the question carefully. I regret that Emma made the choices she did, I said. I regret that she threw away something beautiful for something fake. But do I regret the life I've built for myself?
No.
I'm proud of what I've accomplished. I'm proud that I turned my pain into purpose. They also interviewed my friends and colleagues, people who had watched my transformation from broken woman to successful author. Katrina is an inspiration, said my editor. She took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into a force for good. Her books have helped thousands of people who've been through similar situations. She's nothing like the woman she was 5 years ago, said my neighbor Margaret. That woman was defined by being Emma's mother. This woman is defined by her own accomplishments. But the most powerful interviews were with Jackson and Michael. The boys, now teenagers, were old enough to understand what had happened and articulate how it had affected them. I remember Grammy Katrina, Jackson said, his voice cracking slightly. She was the best grandmother ever. She taught me to bake cookies and told me stories and came to all my soccer games. Then one day, Mom said she couldn't come anymore, and I didn't understand why. I asked Mom if Grammy Katrina was dead, Michael added, because that was the only reason I could think of for why she would just disappear. Mom said no, she wasn't dead. She just couldn't be our grandmother anymore. The interviewer asked them how they felt about Lisa, their birth grandmother. She was nice, I guess, Jackson said with a shrug. But she wasn't Grammy Katrina. She didn't know how to make my favorite cookies or remember which bedtime stories I liked. And then she left too. At least Grammy Katrina never promised to stay and then left, Michael said with the wisdom of a child who had been disappointed too many times. Lisa said she would always be there for us, and then she moved away. The boys' interviews were heartbreaking in their simplicity. They didn't understand the complex dynamics that had torn their family apart. They only knew that they had lost their beloved grandmother and had never been given a satisfactory explanation for why. Do you miss her? The interviewer asked. Every day, Jackson said without hesitation. I still have the picture of us from my 6th birthday party. Sometimes I look at it and remember what it felt like to have a grandmother who really loved us. I wish I could tell her I'm sorry, Michael added. I wish I could tell her that we didn't want her to go away. Those interviews destroyed me. Watching those boys talk about missing me, seeing the pain in their eyes, hearing them take responsibility for something that wasn't their fault, it was almost more than I could bear. But it was also exactly what I needed. The world would see how my abandonment had affected innocent children. They would understand that Emma's choices had consequences beyond just our relationship. The interviews with Emma were scheduled for last. I wasn't allowed to be present during her filming, but I was given transcripts of her sessions. Reading them was both satisfying and infuriating. Emma had clearly prepared extensively for the interviews. She was articulate, remorseful, and completely honest about her mistakes. She didn't try to justify her actions or blame anyone else for her choices. "I destroyed the most important relationship in my life for a fantasy," she said during one session. "I threw away 23 years of unconditional love for the idea of what I thought I wanted. It was the stupidest, most selfish thing I've ever done." She talked about Lisa's abandonment, about the reality of reconnecting with a birth parent who had never really wanted to be a mother. Lisa was charming and exciting, but she was never maternal, Emma admitted. She was playing a role, and when she got bored with the role, she left. Katrina was never playing a role. She was just being my mother every single day for 23 years. When asked about my success as an author, Emma's response was complex. "I'm proud of what Katrina has accomplished," she said, tears in her eyes. She turned her pain into something beautiful and meaningful. But I also know that her success came at the cost of our relationship, and that's something I have to live with. "Do you think she'll ever forgive you?" the interviewer asked. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally, "and I understand why. I taught her that love isn't enough, that sacrifice isn't always appreciated, that even the strongest bonds can be broken. I can't ask her to forget those lessons just because I finally learned them too." The most powerful moment in Emma's interview came when she was asked about the boys. "They're the real victims in all of this," she said, her voice breaking. "They lost their grandmother because of my selfishness. They ask about her constantly, and I have to tell them that she can't be part of our lives anymore because Mommy made some very bad choices." "Have you considered reaching out to Katrina on their behalf?" the interviewer pressed. "I've tried," Emma said. "I've sent letters, pictures, invitations. But I understand why she doesn't respond. Why should she trust me? I already proved that I'll throw her away when something better comes along." The interviewer asked the question I had been waiting for. "If you could say anything to Katrina right now, what would it be?" Emma looked directly into the camera, tears streaming down her face. "I would say that I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry for being selfish and ungrateful. I'm sorry for choosing Lisa over you. I'm sorry for telling you that you weren't my real mother when you were the only real mother I ever had. I'm sorry for depriving my children of the best grandmother they could have asked for. I'm sorry for breaking your heart and then expecting you to forgive me when I finally came to my senses." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I would tell you that I love you," she continued, "that I've loved you every day for the past 5 years, even when I was too proud and stupid to admit it. I would tell you that you gave me the best childhood anyone could ask for, and that every good thing about me comes from you." Another pause. "And I would tell you that I understand why you can't forgive me," she said. "I understand that some mistakes are too big to fix, some betrayals too deep to heal. I understand that I had my chance to be your daughter, and I threw it away for something that was never real." The final question was the one that sealed Emma's fate. "Do you think you deserve Katrina's forgiveness?" Emma looked down at her hands, considering the question carefully. "No," she said quietly. "I don't deserve her forgiveness. I don't deserve her love. I don't deserve a second chance. I had 23 years to appreciate what I had, and I chose to throw it away. That's on me, and I'll live with that choice for the rest of my life." When I read that transcript, I felt a sense of complete and total victory. Emma had finally admitted, on camera, to a national audience, that she didn't deserve my forgiveness. She had acknowledged that her actions were unforgivable, that she had destroyed our relationship through her own selfishness and stupidity. She had given me everything I had wanted, complete vindication, total acknowledgement of her guilt, and public admission that she deserved to live with the consequences of her choices. The documentary aired 6 months later and was an immediate sensation. The Mother Who Fought Back became the most-watched documentary series in the network's history. Social media exploded with discussions about my story, with a vast majority of viewers supporting my decision not to forgive Emma. #Unforgivable betrayals became a trending topic, with people sharing their own stories of family members who had betrayed their trust. #Katrina was right was used by viewers who praised my strength in refusing to accept Emma's apologies. But the most powerful response came from the viewers who focused on Jackson and Michael's interviews. Seeing those boys talk about missing their grandmother, about not understanding why I had disappeared from their lives, generated an outpouring of sympathy and anger directed at Emma. "Those poor children," one viewer wrote. "They lost their grandmother because their mother is selfish and ungrateful. Emma doesn't deserve forgiveness. She deserves to live with the consequences of her actions." "I cried watching those boys talk about missing Katrina," wrote another. "They're the real victims here, and Emma should be ashamed of herself for putting them through this." The documentary had accomplished exactly what I had hoped it would. It had shown the world who was really to blame for our family's destruction, and it had made Emma face the full consequences of her choices. But it had also accomplished something else, something I hadn't expected. It had shown me that my revenge was complete. In the months following the documentary's release, I reached the pinnacle of my success. My 5th book, When Love Isn't Enough, debuted at #1 on the bestseller list. I was invited to speak at universities, women's conferences, and literary festivals around the world. I had achieved everything I had set out to accomplish: fame, success, respect, and complete vindication for my choices. But something unexpected was happening. As I watched the documentary with millions of other viewers, seeing my story played out on screen, I began to notice things I hadn't seen before. I saw the pain in Jackson and Michael's eyes when they talked about missing me. I saw the genuine anguish in Emma's face as she admitted her mistakes. I saw a family that had been completely destroyed by pride, selfishness, and the inability to forgive. And for the first time in 5 years, I began to question whether being right was worth what it had cost. The thought terrified me. I had built my entire new identity around being the wronged party, the victim who had risen above her circumstances. My success, my platform, my purpose, all of it was rooted in Emma's betrayal and my refusal to forgive her. If I started doubting that foundation, what would be left? I tried to push these thoughts away, to focus on my work and my success. But they kept creeping back in, especially late at night when I was alone in my beautiful house with no one to share my accomplishments with. I had gotten everything I thought I wanted: revenge, success, vindication. But I had also lost everything that had ever really mattered to me: my daughter, my grandchildren, my family. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my quest to punish Emma for choosing Lisa over me, I had chosen my pride over my family. I had become the very thing I accused Emma of being: someone who threw away love for something that seemed more important at the time. The realization hit me during a book signing in Denver. A woman approached me with tears in her eyes, clutching a copy of my latest novel.
"Thank you," she said.
"Your books help me understand that I don't have to forgive my daughter for choosing her father over me in our divorce. I cut her off 2 years ago, and your story gave me the strength to stick to my decision." I signed her book with a smile, but inside I felt sick. This woman was using my story to justify abandoning her own child. She was using my pain to validate her own decision to choose pride over love. "How old is your daughter?" I asked. 16, the woman replied. "Old enough to know better."
16.
The same age Emma had been when I gave her my mother's locket, when she had hugged me and said I was the best mother in the world. "Maybe she'll change her mind when she gets older," I suggested carefully. The woman shook her head. I don't care if she does. She made her choice, just like your Emma did. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. She walked away, carrying my book like a weapon, and I realized what I had become. I had become a symbol for people who wanted to justify abandoning their families. I had given them permission to choose anger over love, pride over forgiveness. That night, alone in my hotel room, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at the photos I still kept hidden in my suitcase, pictures of Emma growing up, of our family vacations, of the boys when they were little. There was one picture in particular that I couldn't stop staring at. It was from Emma's wedding day, just moments after the mother-daughter dance. We were both laughing at something David had said, and Emma still had her arms around me. Her wedding dress was beautiful, her smile was radiant, and her eyes were full of love as she looked at me. "Thank you for giving me a life worth celebrating," she had whispered that day. I had given her a life worth celebrating. I had given her everything a mother could give: love, support, guidance, and unconditional acceptance. And she had thrown it all away for fantasy. But what had I done in response? I had thrown away my family for revenge. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I had spent 5 years punishing Emma for making a selfish choice, but I had made an equally selfish choice in response. I had chosen my wounded pride over my love for her. I had chosen public vindication over private healing. I had chosen to be right over being happy. I had become exactly what I accused Emma of being: someone who destroyed her family for something that seemed more important at the time. The next morning, I called my publisher and canceled the rest of my book tour. "Katrina, are you okay?" my editor asked, concerned. "You've got 3 more weeks of appearances scheduled." "I need some time to think," I said. "I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life." "What do you mean?" "Your life is amazing. You're at the top of your career." "My career is built on my family's destruction," I replied. "I'm not sure that's something to celebrate anymore." I drove home in silence, thinking about the woman at the book signing who was using my story to justify abandoning her 16-year-old daughter. I thought about all the people who had praised me for being strong enough to cut Emma out of my life. I thought about the platform I had built on the foundation of unforgiveness. When I got home, I went straight to Emma's old room, the one I had cleaned out and painted beige 5 years ago. It was now my office, filled with awards and accolades from my writing career. But standing there, I could still see traces of the little girl who had once lived there. The pencil marks on the doorframe where I had measured her height every year. The small hole in the wall where she had accidentally thrown a tennis ball too hard. The window she used to sit by, reading the books I brought her from the library. This room had once been filled with love and laughter and the dreams of a little girl who had been saved from a terrible situation. Now it was filled with the fruits of my revenge. I sat down at my desk and stared at the computer screen, trying to figure out what to write. For 5 years, my writing had been my weapon, my way of telling the world what Emma had done to me. But what if I was wrong? What if forgiveness wasn't weakness? What if choosing love over pride was actually the stronger choice? I started typing, slowly at first, then faster as the words poured out of me. "Dear Emma," I wrote, "I've spent 5 years building a career on the foundation of your betrayal. I've written books about your selfishness, given interviews about your cruelty, and turned our family's destruction into my greatest success. I've been praised for being strong, for refusing to be a doormat, for choosing self-respect over love. But I've realized something, and it's taken me far too long to see it. I've become exactly what I accused you of being. I've chosen my pride over my family. I've thrown away love for something that seemed more important at the time. I've destroyed relationships for the sake of being right. You were wrong to choose Lisa over me. You were wrong to tell me I wasn't your real mother. You were wrong to throw away 23 years of love for a fantasy that crumbled. But I was wrong too. I was wrong to choose revenge over forgiveness. I was wrong to punish Jackson and Michael for your mistakes. I was wrong to build a career on our family's pain. I don't know if it's too late to fix what we've broken. I don't know if you can forgive me for the things I've said and done in the name of being right. I don't know if the boys can forgive me for abandoning them when they needed me most.
But I know that I have to try.
Because I've learned something in these 5 years of success and vindication. Being right isn't worth being alone. Being vindicated isn't worth losing your family. Being strong isn't worth having no one to be strong for. I love you, Emma. I've loved you every day for the past 5 years, even when I was too proud and angry to admit it. You will always be my daughter, no matter what either of us has done. And I'm ready to come home, if you'll have me. Love, Mom. I stared at the letter for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. Sending this email would change everything. It would mean admitting that I had been wrong, that my 5 years of success had been built on a foundation of pride and revenge. It would mean giving up my position as the wrong party, the victim who had risen above her circumstances. It would mean choosing love over being right. I pressed send. Chapter 10. The Victory. The response came 3 hours later. I had been pacing my house, checking my phone every few minutes, wondering if Emma would even read the email or if she would delete it without responding. When my phone finally chimed with her reply, my hands were shaking as I opened it. Mom. It began, and just seeing that word after 5 years made me start crying. I can't believe you wrote to me. I can't believe you called yourself my mom again. I've read your email 20 times, and I keep crying every time I get to the part where you say you love me. I don't care if you were wrong. I don't care if you chose revenge over forgiveness. I don't care about any of that because I was the one who started this whole nightmare. I was the one who threw away our family for a fantasy. Everything that happened after that was just consequences. But yes, I want you to come home. Yes, I forgive you for everything. Yes, the boys and I need you in our lives. David is crying as I write this. He said he never stopped hoping that you would find your way back to us. The boys are going to lose their minds when I tell them. Please come over. Please come home. We've missed you so much. I love you, Mom. I've missed you every single day for 5 years, 8 months, and 23 days. Your daughter, Emma. I was sobbing by the time I finished reading her email. Not the careful, controlled tears I had shed during interviews and book signings, but the messy, desperate tears of a mother who had finally found her way back to her child. I drove to Emma's house in my pajamas, not caring how I looked or what anyone would think. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see faces pressed against the windows. Emma, David, and 2 boys who had grown into young men in my absence. Emma was waiting for me at the front door, and when she saw me, she started running. I met her halfway up the walkway, and when she threw her arms around me, it felt like coming home after a 5-year exile. I'm sorry, she sobbed into my shoulder. I'm so sorry for everything. I'm sorry too, I whispered back. I'm sorry I chose being right over being your mother. We stood there crying in each other's arms for what felt like hours, 5 years of pain and anger and loneliness pouring out of us. When we finally pulled apart, I saw Jackson and Michael standing in the doorway, unsure whether they were allowed to join us. Come here, my boys, I said, opening my arms. They ran to me like they were still little children, and suddenly I had all 3 of my babies in my arms again. We were all crying and talking at once, trying to make up for 5 years of missed conversations in 5 minutes. I knew you'd come back, Michael said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. I never stopped believing you'd come back. I missed you so much, Grammy, Jackson added. I kept your picture on my nightstand the whole time. I missed you too, I said, holding them tighter. I'm so sorry I stayed away for so long. David appeared beside us, tears in his eyes. Welcome home, Katrina, he said simply. We spent the rest of the evening talking, catching up on 5 years of lost time. The boys told me about school, their friends, their achievements and disappointments. Emma told me about her struggles, her therapy, her attempts to become a better person. David told me about trying to hold the family together while everyone was broken. The documentary was hard to watch, Emma admitted. Seeing myself through your eyes, seeing how my choices affected everyone, it was brutal. But it was also necessary. I needed to see the truth about what I had done. I've been thinking about the documentary too, I said. Watching it made me realize that I had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who chose revenge over love. You weren't wrong to be angry, Emma said. You weren't wrong to protect yourself. I hoped that someday you might be ready to forgive me. I've been ready for a long time, I admitted. I was just too proud to admit it. As the evening wore on, I realized something profound. This wasn't the ending I had originally planned for my story. When I started writing 5 years ago, when I began building my career on the foundation of Emma's betrayal, I thought victory would look different. I thought victory would be Emma begging for my forgiveness while I remained unmoved. I thought it would be her suffering while I thrived. I thought it would be proving to the world that I was right and she was wrong. But sitting in that living room, surrounded by my family again, I understood what real victory looked like. Real victory wasn't making Emma pay for her mistakes. It was finding our way back to each other despite them. Real victory wasn't building a career on our family's destruction. It was rebuilding our family from the ashes. Real victory wasn't choosing pride over love. It was choosing love over everything else. What happens now? Emma asked as the evening was winding down. With your career, I mean. Your platform is built on, well, on this story. On not forgiving me. I had been thinking about that all day. My entire public persona was built on being the mother who refused to forgive, the woman who chose self-respect over family reconciliation. What would happen to my career when the world found out I had gone back to Emma? I don't know, I said honestly. I might lose some fans. Some people might think I'm weak for forgiving you. I don't want you to sacrifice your success for me, Emma said quickly. You've built something incredible. You've helped so many people. Have I? I asked. Or have I just given people permission to abandon their families? Have I just encouraged more broken relationships in the name of self-respect? I thought about the woman at the book signing, using my story to justify cutting off her 16-year-old daughter. I thought about all the #Team Katrina posts, all the people who had praised me for being strong enough to walk away from my family. Maybe it's time for a different kind of story, I said. Maybe it's time to show people that forgiveness takes more strength than revenge. That choosing love over pride is the harder path, not the easier one. Emma smiled through her tears. You're going to write about this too, aren't you? If you'll let me, I said. But this time, I want to write about healing instead of hurt, about building instead of breaking, about what happens when love wins. We talked until late into the night, making plans for the future. Jackson wanted me to come to his soccer championship next week. Michael wanted to show me the piano pieces he had learned. Emma wanted to cook dinner for me on Sunday, using the recipes I had taught her when she was young. For the first time in 5 years, I had a family again. As I was getting ready to leave, Emma walked me to my car. Mom, she said, I need to ask you something. Do you think we can really get past this? All of it? The books, the documentary, the 5 years of hurt. I looked at my daughter, my real daughter, the child I had raised and loved and lost and found again, and I knew the answer. Emma, I said, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little and you were worried about making mistakes? She thought for a moment, then smiled. You used to say that families aren't broken by mistakes. They're broken by giving up on each other. That's right, I said. And we didn't give up. It took us 5 years to find our way back to each other, but we didn't give up. I drove home that night with a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in years.
For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like myself again. Not Katrina Walsh, best-selling author and symbol of justified anger. Not the woman who had built an empire on her family's destruction. Just Katrina,
Emma's mom,
Jackson and Michael's grandmother. A woman who had made mistakes and been forgiven for them. The next morning, I sat down at my computer and began writing a new kind of story. Not about revenge or justified anger or the importance of self-respect, but about second chances and the courage it takes to forgive. About choosing love over pride and family over victory. About what happens when broken people find their way back to each other. I wrote about a mother who had spent 5 years building a career on her daughter's betrayal, only to realize that success, without family, was just another kind of failure. I wrote about a daughter who had thrown away the most important relationship in her life for a fantasy, then spent 5 years learning what she had lost. Most importantly, I wrote about forgiveness. Not the easy kind of forgiveness that costs nothing, but the hard kind that requires swallowing your pride and admitting you might have been wrong. The kind that means giving up your position as the victim and choosing to be vulnerable again. As I wrote, I realized that this was the story I should have been telling all along. Not the story of justified anger and righteous revenge, but the story of imperfect people trying to love each other despite their mistakes. The story of what happens when love wins. When I finished writing, I called my publisher. Katrina, my editor said, surprised to hear from me. How are you feeling? Ready to get back to the tour? Actually, I said, I have a new book for you. A different kind of book. Another revenge story? The readers can't get enough of your work.
No, I said.
Not a revenge story. A forgiveness story. There was silence on the other end of the line. A forgiveness story? My editor repeated. Katrina, your brand is built on strength, on refusing to be a doormat. Your readers love you because you don't forgive. That's your whole platform. Maybe it's time for a new platform, I said. Maybe it's time to show people that forgiveness takes more strength than revenge. I don't know, my editor said hesitantly. This could be career suicide. Your fans expect a certain kind of story from you. Then maybe I need new fans, I replied. People who are interested in healing instead of hurting. People who want to rebuild their families instead of destroying them. It took 6 months to convince my publisher to take the risk. The Mother Who Came Home was a completely different kind of book from my previous work. Instead of justified anger, it was about humility. Instead of revenge, it was about reconciliation. Instead of winning at all costs, it was about choosing love over being right. Some of my fans hated it. The hashtag Team Katrina crowd felt betrayed, as if I had abandoned everything they believed in. My sales dropped initially, and several speaking engagements were canceled. But something else happened too. I started hearing from different kinds of readers. Parents who had reconciled with estranged children. Adult children who had forgiven their parents for old hurts. Families who had been inspired to choose love over pride. Your new book saved my relationship with my daughter, one woman wrote. I was about to cut her off permanently, but your story made me realize that being right isn't worth being alone. I read your forgiveness book and finally called my mom after 3 years of silence, wrote another reader. We're having dinner next week. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to come home. The letters poured in from people who had been inspired not to abandon their families, but to fight for them. People who had chosen the harder path of forgiveness and found it led to healing. A year after our reconciliation, I was asked to appear on Sandra Morrison's show again. This time, the interview was different. Katrina Walsh, Sandra said, introducing me to her audience. The woman who showed us that forgiveness takes more courage than revenge. Welcome back to the show. The audience applauded, but it was a different kind of applause. Warmer, more hopeful. Last time you were here, you told the world that some mistakes can't be forgiven, Sandra said. Now you've written a book about forgiveness and reconciliation. What changed? I realized that I had become someone I didn't recognize, I said. I had spent so much time being right that I forgot how to be happy. I had won every battle, but I was losing the war for my family. Some people have criticized you for going back to Emma, Sandra continued. They say you've become weak, that you've abandoned the principles that made you successful. Some people think that forgiveness is weakness, I agreed. But I've learned that it takes more strength to forgive than to hold a grudge. It takes more courage to choose love than to choose pride. What would you say to someone who's struggling with whether to forgive a family member who has hurt them? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about all the broken families out there, all the people who are choosing anger over love, pride over healing. I would say that being right isn't worth being alone, I said. I would say that families aren't perfect and people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we have to give up on each other. I would say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing to love someone despite their mistakes. The interview aired to a huge audience, but the response was different this time. Instead of hashtag Team Katrina and debates about justified anger, the hashtags were about healing and hope. Hashtag Choose Love and hashtag Forgiveness Takes Strength trended for weeks. But the most important response came from a teenage girl who tweeted, "Just watched at Katrina Walsh on Sandra Morrison. Called my mom for the first time in 6 months. We're having lunch tomorrow. Sometimes love is worth more than being right." That tweet made everything worth it. All the criticism, all the lost sales, all the people who thought I had become weak. None of it mattered compared to one family choosing love over pride. 2 years after our reconciliation, Emma and I co-wrote a book together. The Mother and Daughter Who Found Their Way Home became a bestseller, but more importantly, it became a roadmap for other families trying to heal from similar wounds. We appeared on talk shows together, speaking about forgiveness and second chances and the courage it takes to choose love over pride. We shared our story not as a cautionary tale about betrayal, but as a hopeful story about healing. Some people think forgiveness means forgetting, Emma would say during our appearances. But that's not what happened with us. We didn't forget the hurt. We chose to love each other despite it. Forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you, I would add. It's about the person you want to be. I could have stayed angry forever, and I would have been justified in doing so. But I didn't want to be an angry person. I wanted to be a loving person. The speaking engagements were wonderful, but the best part of my new life was the ordinary moments. Sunday dinners with Emma's family. Soccer games where I cheered loudly for Jackson. Piano recitals where I cried tears of pride watching Michael perform. Bedtime stories with grandchildren who once again called me Grammy. The simple, beautiful moments of being part of a family again. On Emma's 40th birthday, we had a party in the same backyard where Jackson had celebrated his 6th birthday all those years ago. As I watched my family laughing and playing together, I thought about the woman I had been 5 years earlier, broken, angry, determined to make Emma pay for her mistakes. That woman had gotten everything she thought she wanted. She had achieved success, fame, and complete vindication for her choices. She had proven to the world that she was right, and Emma was wrong. But she had been miserable. This woman, the woman who had chosen forgiveness over revenge, love over pride, family over victory, had everything that actually mattered. She had her daughter back. She had her grandchildren back. She had a family that, while imperfect, was filled with love and second chances. As the party was winding down, Emma came and sat beside me on the porch swing where we used to read bedtime stories when she was little. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Forgiving me? Coming back? Giving up your platform as the woman who refused to forgive?" I thought about the question seriously. I thought about the career I had built on our family's destruction, the success that had come from refusing to forgive, the platform I had given up to choose love over pride. Never, I said without hesitation. This is the life I was meant to live. This is the woman I was meant to be. Even though you were right? Emma asked. Even though I deserved to lose you? I turned to look at my daughter, my beautiful, imperfect, beloved daughter who had made terrible mistakes and learned from them, who had hurt me deeply and spent years trying to make amends. Emma, I said, I've learned something important these past few years. Being right isn't the same thing as being happy. Winning isn't the same thing as living. And sometimes the greatest victory is choosing love over everything else. She smiled and laid her head on my shoulder, just like she used to do when she was little and worried about something. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I love you too, baby, I whispered back. Always and forever. As the sun set over our backyard, surrounded by the laughter of my grandchildren and the warmth of my reclaimed family, I realized that this was what victory really looked like. Not revenge or vindication, or proving that I was right, but love, forgiveness,
Second chance.
a family that had been broken but had chosen to heal, a story that had started with betrayal but ended with grace. This was my true victory, not the destruction of my enemies, but the rebuilding of my family. Not the punishment of those who had wronged me, but the choice to love them despite their mistakes. This was the story I was meant to tell. The story of a mother who had lost everything and found her way back to what really mattered. The story of what happens when love wins. And that's Katrina's story, a tale of pain, revenge, and ultimately, the courage to choose love over pride. If this story moved you, please subscribe to her true stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss our most powerful tales of triumph and transformation. Comment below and tell us, do you think Katrina made the right choice in the end? Have you ever had to choose between being right and being happy? Share your thoughts. We love hearing from our amazing community. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest victory is choosing love over everything else.